family is to pre-plan. So during an emotional time, the plans can be carried out because decisions have already been made. An end-of-life doula is what I am doing now. I've had background in hospice, and an end-of-life doula is a non-medical end-of-life coach, helping patients to have a good death, in that ensuring patients' end-of-life wishes and needs are met, that they come first. I'm a devoted, compassionate partner, develop a compassionate partnership, helping the person lean into the pain and fear of the unknown, which frees up space and energy so that we can experience and focus on possibilities during this time at the end of life, rather than the limitations. As an end-of-life doula, I foster connections, even during an emotional, painful time. The doula provides an open-hearted presence who won't turn away in the face of suffering. I might help with a variety of things, depending on need and depending on the person. End-of-life planning, help create sacred rituals for the last days, carry on Jewish traditions or personal wishes, finding Jewish rituals that are comforting, and if possible, help to create a family legacy project with stories or photos. I support the person throughout the transitional aspects of dying. I can help provide a variety of options if desired, writing letters of forgiveness, review and reflect life events. I offer comfort to the patient and the family. I can be there for support during times of grief and bereavement, which can come in waves and recycle over time. I meet with a family and patient without an agenda, but to help fulfill the person's needs and desires in a loving and creative way. I can also utilize music and meditation if desired. We may not know how we will die, suddenly, a long illness, a short illness, or in our sleep, but we can plan ahead for the inevitable in a variety of ways. In that way, we have some measure of control. We also can meet long before the end of life to make decisions. And we are blessed to be in this moment right now. So I'd like to turn this over to my longtime good friend, Dr. Dale Oler, who has practiced psychiatry in Portland for 30 years. After her husband, Earl, of blessed memory, died in 2016, she wrote this book about her bereavement. And she's going to talk about her book, Yad B'Yad. Dale.
Thank you, Lori, for inviting me to participate in this panel, and such a nice introduction. When I heard who all would be on the panel, I realized there was doula and Hebra and rabbinic and funeral, and I realized my role is the lens of the psychological perspective. And I, in 30 years, have listened to many, many stories, many people grieving over different losses. I actually thought in my training, in my residency, that I was well trained to handle these concepts of bereavement, loss, grieving. But it really wasn't until 5 years ago when Earl died that I truly understood it. It was actually shocking how little I could put myself in the shoes of someone going through such an experience. And I think that's a lesson for us, that until you've been in those shoes, it's very difficult. In thinking about death planning, I was reminded almost 50 years ago, my cohort of women were doing birth planning of our babies. And we were thinking, is it going to be in the hospital or at home, in a tub of water, whatever. And I think there is a parallel with death planning, and that's what this panel is about. And just as with birth planning, sometimes you get to implement everything that was on your list. And then sometimes it's all turned upside down with an emergency C-section and all the planning goes out the window. And I think the same with death planning. It's very healthy and it's very helpful. And sometimes you're lucky and you get to implement everything that was on your plan. I feel I was quite lucky. Earl and I had 10 months to really do our planning. And that included picking caskets and picking a place for burial plot and discussing. He even wanted to read the eulogies before he died, which he did. And so in a way, what we were doing would be called anticipatory grief. And it's a very hard job because it's pushing out denial and inviting in reality that we're all mortal. So I use the word grief in the context of anticipatory grief. And I thought I would take just a couple minutes to define some of the words that other panelists are going to be using. We're all sort of using some of the same words interchangeably, but they're really defined differently. So the first is bereavement, which is simply a reaction to death. And I would say with this pandemic, the national theme and national emotion is bereavement. And it's such huge numbers. The sociologists have taught us there's no way our brain wraps around huge hundreds of thousands of deaths. So I would just offer this one concept that each death, even if it's thousands, each death was an individual, a person who sat at a Shabbos dinner, a friend or a relative, and to sort of keep that in mind as we get bombarded with so many numbers. The second word is grief, which is psychological, emotional reaction to loss. Notice I didn't say death because we grieve about many things. And during this pandemic, we are grieving about death and illness, but also about the loss of holding your grandchild or going to Shabbos dinner in real instead of virtual Zoom. And I put some quotes in the chat box, and I'm only going to read one of them, but I think C.S. Lewis really hit the nail on the head when he said, quote, "No one ever told me that grief felt so like fear." And I think these words, grief and fear, are very closely related. And with the pandemic, we're seeing it sort of as a mishmash. We're grieving illness and deaths, and we're fearing a virus, and we're fearing illness and death, and we're grieving what this virus has done to change our lives. The third word is mourning. And this is the social expression of bereavement, grief, or combination. And it is influenced by culture, religion, customs, and rituals. And I'm going to hone in on the last word, rituals, because it's really about rituals that got me thinking after Earl died to write Yad B'Yad. Because in Judaism, we just have this whole array of rituals around dying and death. And I felt at Neve Sholem Nothing was prescriptive. No one said you must do this, you must do that. Instead, it was really a choice of what appealed to me, what I resonated with. And I even added some very non-religious, made-up rituals. And I do think it was satisfying. It promoted a spiritual experience in addition to religious. The ancient sages were so smart. They would be our modern day psychologists in that they offered ritual that really had psychological principles. The two I'd like to mention are, one was rhythm, that many of the Jewish rituals have a definite rhythm to them. And so my example is go to morning minyan, say Kaddish, come home, write the check for tzedakah, which I did for the first 30 days. And it just gave me a rhythm because you're in a fog when you're doing this hard work of grieving and mourning. And the other is marking time. So you have Shiva for 7 days, Shloshim for 30 days, and then from death to the first yortzeit is a year. And that marking time, I have really appreciated in the years of listening to patients, how important that piece is. And Judaism, the sages, they knew this. So I am sheepishly going to encourage you to take a look at this book called Yad B'Yad. It is short, it's simple, it is succinct, and it even has large print, which I did intentionally because when you are going through grieving and mourning, it is not a time to pick up an 800-page novel. You can barely read an article. So the book is really just an offer of some ideas of rituals. And because I wrote it in 2019, 2020, I included such things as Black Lives Matter, COVID-19, suicide, homicide, the things that we all were observing during 2020. And so I'm shamelessly going to not only plug this book of mine, but to mention that on my website, it says you can get it at Amazon, but I really like to support local independent bookstores. And the one I have asked to stock it is Broadway Books because of my dear friend Gloria Old, who started that. And with that, I welcome questions later. I'll be happy to field them if I'm able to. And I can't see her on my screen, but I'm going to pass now the virtual mic to Rabbi Eve Posen.
Thank you, Dale. And I just want to say that it's beautiful to go right after you because writing the Yad B'Yad book was Yad B'Yad. We held hands in that process.
Yes.
In the way that book, it is your gift and your grieving process that led you to it. But I was honored to be walking that journey with you and helping to understand what the entire process of grieving through Judaism and creative ritual with all of your expertise is really a gift to our community. I have it on my secondary desk. It's a laundry basket. It sits right there because I often need it when I work with families because it is such a great resource for us. I'm here really as a representative of the Oregon Board of Rabbis. I currently hold the position of the chair of that board, and also as a rabbi at Congregation Neve Shalom, to really sort of implore you to think about what it is that you hope to get out of the experience of grieving. And I know that those words are weird to put together, but when we stand in this space, when a loss is impending, it's very hard to know what to do because our head is in 100 different places. But Judaism has incredible rituals that can help guide you and make meaning and walk you through them in an incredibly beautiful way that doesn't actually require you to make too many decisions, because we have a process for doing that. And so often when people are expecting a loss or are experiencing a loss, they focus on the logistics of, okay, but I have to pick out a casket, and I need to figure out the cemetery plots, and I need to, the business of it. And that's all really important, and we'll talk about that. But the reality of walking the Jewish journey and making sure that a rabbi is on your list of somebody to talk to, preferably before it happens, but certainly as it's happening, making sure that you reach out, can really make this journey one that is incredibly both healing and supported, and also beautiful walking forward. And I speak to this because so often we, as the Board of Rabbis, we just talked about this at our meeting last week. We often end up with families who, because they haven't heard of some of our customs like Shiva, the 7 days after a loss, sitting together and going through grief and holding that space, are hesitant to even accept it as a one-day possibility for their loss. So if a rabbi brings it up, often what happens is, oh no, that's not what we do, we're not religious. But in this moment, it's not about how religious you are. It's about how we can take the Jewish ritual. Dale, you said it really beautifully, how we can take this ritual and have it there to hold us and help us as we walk forward. I'll never forget when I was in 6th grade, when my first grandparent died. It was my first experience of death. And I didn't know anything about Jewish mourning at all. But what I saw was that from the moment my grandfather died, there were people there to support my family. And sitting in Shiva, knowing that, yes, there were chocolate covered potato chips that were delivered, which is probably why I remember this, healthy and sweet together, very good memory. But I saw people show up for community and to be there together. I knew nothing about it. My family had not sat Shiva before, and certainly in my lifetime, but it was something that they were asked if they wanted to do. And my grandmother, whose husband had passed, said no. And what did she do? She locked herself away in her bedroom while the rest of the family gathered in community. And by the end, we did a full week, but you don't have to do a full week. It's really about finding that space and using the ritual to help do what works for you. My grandmother walked out of her bedroom in the evenings. She wasn't coming at 7 o'clock in the morning for services. But in the evening, she walked out because she finally felt like it was the right time to be together in community. And I remember seeing that and knowing that there is something really beautiful about Jewish ritual. And as a rabbi, and as many rabbis do, we work hard to share that beauty because it can help guide you on your journey. We're there to not just give the eulogy and walk away, but to be present and to help you make those decisions that are right for you and your family. And it's never too early to even just have that conversation about what it could look like or what is possible or is not possible when it comes to Jewish death and Jewish burial and working together. And we are all here as the Board of Rabbis to do that work in our community. We also have a community chaplain, Rabbi Barry Cohen, who does incredible work on helping people walk that journey as well. So even if you're not a Neve member, you want to talk to a rabbi, he's also always around to help us with this work. But it is what we do. It is how we connect with each other. And it's never a bad time to have that conversation and just learn about it, because it can help with the psychological and the physical work of moving forward. And we also do that because there's prep work that has to happen. And one of the Jewish rituals that I'm going to turn the virtual mic over to Sharon to talk about the Chevra, Kavod Hamet. One of the most beautiful rituals we have is rituals of loss and Shiva are mostly about supporting the grieving. But this ritual with the Chevra Kavod Hamet is really about human dignity and supporting the life, honoring the life and the physical body that has left us, that we are now grieving. And this is one of those places where I'm so glad you're all here to hear about this ritual, because often we don't know that it exists, and it's really powerful and can be a beautiful bridge in these moments of transition. Sharon.
Hello, I am Sharon Fendrick. I am co-chair of the Hever Kavod Hamet, which is the Hever Kadisha in Portland that serves the non-Orthodox community. I've been a member now for pushing 6 years, and I can say it's the most meaningful work I've ever done in my life. It is the work that gives me the most pause, reflection, just appreciation of the sanctity of life and living. And it's wonderful to know about it. I didn't know anything about the Hever Kadisha until the last days of my grandmother's life. And now I've come so far, and I'm so blessed to be a part of it. It's something that so many people don't know anything about, yet it's something that has existed in Jewish life since at least, the year like 300, 400, it's been around. And even before then, we know that death is always taken very seriously, and something special happens. It's important to know that Tahara and the rituals surrounding death have a minhag, just like most, rituals do in a community. The community has their own twist they've put on things, their own way that they do things. But it's important to also remember that the fundamentals are exactly the same. The meaning behind whatever we do, wherever it is, it's exactly the same. The things that the Orthodox Hevra do essentially is exactly the same of what we do. And like Dale's talking about bereavement and grief, and we think about those that we've lost and that experience of grief. But we have to remember that there is a deceased person, and it's a Jewish belief that soul is still there. They too need comfort, and they too need to be attended to and to prepare for their burial and this transition. And that's where the members of the Hever Kadisha come into play. Often you don't hear about us or know about the ritual because there is a sense that it's a secret thing, it's a secret society. But really what it is that we do our work silently. We do it for the deceased, and we don't want to take, the bereaved and the mourners, they have their stuff they need to deal with and their responsibilities and their moments and being with each other, but it's our job to be with the deceased. So essentially what happens structurally here is that when someone dies, no matter where they die, the funeral home will come in and get them. And usually in our community, that's Holman's, but there are others. And they take the person to the funeral home. And then depending on when the burial has been set to occur, a team of women or a team of men, because men prepare men and women prepare women. And I should say, if you identify as a man, you will be prepared by a male team and such. We come in an hour to 3 hours before the person will be transported from the funeral home to the place of burial. And we, as a team of 3 or 4, I'll just speak as us as the women, we very lovingly and silently, unless we are together reciting a prayer, we have a sort of a manual we go by that we have with us, and it leads us through all the steps that, that we need to do. And we are there. Our Hever Kavod Hamet means, that we are the group that is honoring the deceased. The very first thing that we do is that we acknowledge in prayer that the deceased that the soul basically is there with us, and we ask forgiveness from them for any indiscretion we may cause in doing the work that we do. We will act with kindness, with love, and we do. And we are with them, and it's a profound feeling of it. I often liken it to, I have 2 children, and to holding a newborn, to taking care of them in a way that they can't care for themselves. It's that exact same feeling. And it's very intimate and very beautiful to be close to death in that way. Essentially, we cleanse the body in just, you know, kind of a superficial way, as if you were taking a shower. And then we will do the actual Tahara, which means purification. We'll do the actual pouring of water over the deceased. And we emulate the flowing waters of like a mountain stream, Mayim Chayim, the living waters. And it is very, very beautiful. And there are in other communities, you may have heard of them actually having an immersion like mikveh in the funeral home, where they can actually immerse the body. That's traditionally done 3 times, but we don't have that. So we have water buckets that we pour over, and we say, he is pure or she is pure as we do that. And through all these stages, we have these beautiful prayers that we recite, sometimes are sung. And then the body is dried and is then dressed in their burial shrouds. And each step, every single step we do, there's something beautiful that we say that goes along with this. And you really feel like you're preparing this person for something beautiful. They're dressed in pure white, mirroring the way that the Kohen Gadol would go into the temple. And some view this as, you know, wearing white just like you would on your wedding day. And we dress the men in a kittel, and well, the women have kind of one too, but it mirrors that wedding kind of idea, and that you're going to go to be with God for eternity. And it's incredibly beautiful. And then once we have dressed them, we place them very lovingly in their casket, which is important to think about this. The casket is called the Aron. And what is the Aron Kodesh? You think about when we're in services and you're looking at the Torah and it is in the Aron, you have to think about that life in Judaism is the most holy thing. And life has been breathed into, you know, the vessel of a human being by God. And so when we are loving this deceased person, we are treasuring them as if we were holding a Torah. And that is amazing. And we have some earth from Israel that we sprinkle in the casket so that they have some of Israel, that they're buried in Israel basically. And we close the casket, and then someone is always with the casket until the funeral home takes them to the place of burial. And the person who stays with them is called the shomer, and that is the process of shmirah. They silently recite psalms in the presence of next to the casket. And it's just an absolutely beautiful thing. I can tell you, during the time of COVID, this has been hard. We were shut down, basically. We chose to shut ourselves down last March, but we decided we were going to do everything possible to honor the deceased in every way we possibly could, because we know that it is such a comfort in the community. And it's the right thing to do. So we devised sort of this amended manual, so to speak, that we still gather. We've had 30 of them. We gather on Zoom and we go through the prayers. We have a bowl of water. We still pour our water. We give it to the earth at the end. Simultaneously, the funeral home is putting everyone, it's covering everyone with a tallis, has a prayer book they're putting with them, is sprinkling the dirt. We know that we're doing everything we can. And that, to me, this entire thing is about community being there for you in some way and being a part of that or receiving it. It shows how Judaism really, really values the life cycle from the Brit Milah to the B'nai Mitzvah, to the marriage, and to your Tahara. And it's, I feel sad for people that miss out on it. I want people to be able to choose whether they're going to have Tahara for themselves or for their loved one. I don't want them to find out afterwards, oh my gosh, I didn't know about this thing. So that's that. I'm passing off to Fred Rothstein, who is Executive Director at Neve Shalom.
Thank you, Sharon. You know, I want to begin my thoughts by just noting that all of us here owe so much thanks and appreciation to every one of the folks who have spoken already and the ones who will speak during the rest of this program, right? We can see there's a whole community of people here to be part of this experience with you, for you. And it's helpful and important to know that. So I want to talk a little bit about my role. And in some ways, my role is that intersection between the eternal and the religious and the practical and the logistics. I help families to make the arrangements for funerals. I don't work alone. And one of the things you should know and can know, for those who are members at Neve Shalom, we have a full team of clergy and staff that are involved and engaged and available to help you at any time that's needed. It's part of why you're in a community, why you're a member of a congregation. I want to introduce and acknowledge Mark Everett, who is on this call, who does so much in helping our families and working in partnership with me and with our clergy team and with the rest of the staff on cemetery-related issues and funerals in particular. We have a staff at the cemetery who understand the need for care and respect. So we're proud of the team we have. We have, as many of you know, 2 cemeteries that we host and own and operate through Neve Shalom, Neve Zedek and Avi Shalom. Why does the synagogue have 2 cemeteries? Because we were the merger of 2 congregations, each of which had cemeteries. So people say, well, which one should I be buried at? And we help you in selecting the cemetery and the plot that makes the most sense for you. Some people make the decision based on family history, right? Older, long-time members, their families started at Avi Shalom or at Neve Zedek, and that's the cemetery they want to be buried in. Others make the decision based on geography. Where do they live? Which cemetery is closer? Which cemetery is closer to where their family lives for visitation later? So there are all kinds of reasons. Another one is tone and feel. While we are committed to taking incredibly good care of our cemeteries and keeping them beautiful, they each have a different feel. They have a different kind of ambiance or tone when one walks in, and different families have a particular affinity for the way one hits them or feels when they work. One of the reasons this session is so important is that pre-planning is the best thing anybody can do for their family. The time of death is such an emotionally wrought period, obviously, that the more a family, the more an individual plan or couple plan in advance for their own deaths, the more helpful it is and the easier it is for families when the time comes. I do want to mention just briefly, if ever there is a family that has no resources, dying is not cheap. It's an expensive proposition. We are really fortunate in Portland for a family that has really 0 resources. We have a community that is committed to providing a dignified Jewish burial no matter what, regardless of one's circumstances. There's an organization that was created some years ago called Chesed Shel Emet. You can call any of us, You can call me, you can call the Federation, you can call any of the other congregations in town. We'll help that family connect with Chesed Shalamet, and a dignified funeral would be provided. So while funerals are not inexpensive, money is never the reason to not have a Jewish funeral. So what happens when someone dies and they call the synagogue? Generally, they will get to me. On many occasions, Mark, but on lots of times me. And it is my cell number that is on the answer phone for the overnight answering machine at the synagogue for emergency situations and deaths. When I connect with a family, and particularly if they're doing pre-planning, I let them know two things: that at the time of death, there are really two calls that need to be made. One is to the synagogue, generally to me, and those who pre-plan, I make sure they have my cell phone number. I do tell people, don't call me in the middle of the night. And it's not because I'm afraid of getting the call. It's simply there's nothing I can really be doing to be helpful in the middle of the night. So families, I say, call me from 7, 8 in the morning till 10, 11 at night. That's fine. We'll help you through it. But the middle of the night, there's very little I can do. On the contrary, and Cameron can correct me if I overspeak, but I do say call Holman's anytime, day or night, 24/7. They always have someone on call. They will help to pick up the deceased, to bring your loved one to their facility, to at least begin that stage of the process. So those are the two calls. Holman's will begin on their end, and then I will help to coordinate the kinds of arrangements that need to be made. I will help the family to be in touch with the clergy, with one of the rabbis. I will help them to connect or reconnect with Holman's. I will work on coordinating a time for funeral, a time for them to connect or meet with the rabbi. All those kinds of details that need to happen. Generally, I or Marg are the folks who can kind of walk the families through step by step by step. COVID has been an interesting time to deal with death. There are additional challenges and restrictions. So one of which, as you all might surmise, is there are really limited numbers of people who can attend a funeral. In our case, we've kept the limit to 15 people who attend our funerals. The funerals are graveside only. We're not using any inside space. So those create challenges. We also have not been doing in-person Shiva Minions. We do Zoom Shiva Minions. And the truth is, they've been remarkably well received by families and so helpful and so supportive. Relatives and friends from all over the country, all over the world, are now able to participate in a Shiva Minion for a family and provide that level of comfort and support, and it's been appreciated. Dale, I think, spoke earlier about morning minyan and attending Kaddish. Our morning minyan has tripled in size during this COVID period. We have 25 or 30 folks participating every single morning. They are among the most supportive people one could ever imagine to families experiencing grief and during the year of mourning. We are so lucky that Dale wrote Yad B'Yad, the book. Every one of our Never Shalom families who experiences death will receive that book. So not to take away from independent local bookstores or Amazon, but Never Shalom families, we will provide you that book to help you walk through the year following a death. So again, it's really where the religious meets the practical. We're here for you. Please God, you should not have to deal with death and funerals on a regular or recurring basis. We do, and we can help you through it. So that's what we do. We're available, and we are here for you all the time with really a full team. With that, I will introduce Cameron Holmes, who really is an incredible friend to the Jewish community in supporting us during these times. And Cameron, you're what, the general manager of Holman's? Is that the right title now? Title?
Well, thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Fred. And thank you everybody for allowing me to be part of this today. I've really enjoyed hearing everybody, all the great people that have spoke before me. And before I begin, I just want to take a moment and I just want to thank Fred and Marg and the great clergy and everybody there, the Hever Kadisha and the cemetery crew for the cemeteries. We all work together, and it takes all of us to, make things go smoothly. And everybody's been so helpful, and we really appreciate it. It makes our job that much easier here at Holman's. So basically, I just wanted to let people know, pre-planning, as Fred said, a lot of people more people are doing that now. It makes everybody's job easier when the time comes. And a lot of people have come in and they've told me, they said, I want to take care of this so my kids don't have to worry about it, or so my family doesn't have to worry about it, or so they know exactly how I want things. And so more and more people have done it, whereas in years past, it was, not many people wanted to talk about it or do it ahead of time. So it's been a good thing. And I also want to kind of reiterate what Fred said. There's two parts to it. The cemetery side of things, buying your plot and doing that. And then the funeral home side of things, what we take care of, when somebody passes, the transportation, all the paperwork, getting the death certificate signed, the casket, all those things that we take care of. That's another part of it too. Whereas I have a lot of people will come in and I'll feel sorry for them because they'll say, oh, my mom said everything's paid for, I don't need to worry about it. And oftentimes it's, well, the cemetery side of things was paid for, but not the funeral home, or vice versa. And so I just wanted to, make sure everybody, the two parts, and we all work together. But again, there's the funeral home side of things, and then there's also the cemetery side of things. And as far as the pre-planning goes, you don't have to prepay. You can. A lot of people like to do that, and it locks in the price and everything. But again, you don't have to. You can just come in and get all your wishes and everything on paper, and makes it easier when the time comes. And we are slowly updating. We're slow to adapt to everything, but we've got things set up now where we can meet with people on Zoom, and we can, do the sign the papers and do things electronically now, and to make things easier for people that may not want to drive over to the funeral home, or just want to do it, from their home. And we also are available to come to your home for those people that would like us to do that. So anyways, I don't have a lot. If there's questions from people, I'm happy to try to answer those the best that I can. And again, I just want to thank everybody for allowing me to be a part of this, and for the long-standing great relationship Holman's has with Neve Shalom and the whole Jewish community in Portland, going back a long, long time ago. So we appreciate that, and we value it very much. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Cameron. Is Michelle, am I on, or are you on?
You're up. Yes, you're
okay. I'm up. Just a reminder, everybody, there will be an educational packet that comes out with contact information. If you don't have your questions answered today for time, or because it's complicated, or you really want to talk to Rabbi Eve or to Fred, we'll make sure that happens. And so please be aware of that. At the bottom of your screen is the chat box. And if you have questions now, plug it into the chat box, and then Michelle's going to take it away and MC the questions.
Definitely. And I just want to, while people are thinking about their questions, if you have some, want to reiterate a thank you to everyone who participated today. This is such an important topic. As many of you know, this is my second time as staff on at Neve Shalom, and the first time I was on staff, the cemetery was part of my portfolio, and it truly was still to this day some of the most gratifying work I did, because because of everything that we've discussed here. And I really appreciate all of you that participated today, and hope that we can help in any way to make things a little bit smoother for you. In regards to being with the deceased overnight at the funeral home, it depends. We are working on it, not as a matter of course yet, but it is what we are working towards. Looks like, Sharon, were you answering something that someone else had I didn't see the question.
Yeah,
Sharon,
I was answering Jamie's question.
Oh, okay, thank you. Lori, somebody wants to know if you got the title of End of Life Doula from Jody Pickholt's newest book. She was wondering where you got the End of Life Doula title.
you're muted.
Is she muted?
Sorry, it's from the coursework that I did. There are lots of names for it. Sometimes you'll hear death doula. I personally don't care for that title.
I have a question here from Mara about what about intermarried couples and burial rituals? So I can only answer that from the Tahara point of view, that we only do Tahara for Jews, but we do have a ritual that is very rarely done, but if asked for, will be considered, and that is sort of like a special ritual called a final kindness, which is a modified version that is done for someone who maybe has been, you know, very important in the Jewish community, or a family member. I mean, everything is sort of considered case by case. We don't just flat out say no to everything, but we try to work with someone that's seeking help. So hope that answers the question.
I can tell you that at both of the Neve Shalom cemeteries, we do have separate interfaith sections that both spouses could be buried in together.
Let's see, we have, when does the End of Life Doula get involved? Is there a process for requesting one, Lori?
It depends on the person. If they want to make plans and need help in making plans, and their wishes be known, that can happen at any time. My email will be on the list of participants, or you can call the synagogue and the synagogue will get in touch with me. If it's truly end of life, it can be at any time. But if someone is going through a long-term illness, it's probably a good idea to work with me sooner, when the person is aware and able to.
Thank you. If one wishes not to have the Tahara service, how can they be assured this will not be done?
So Tahara is arranged by either the synagogue or by Cameron, by Holman's. We make the call to the Chevra. If a family actively does not want Tahara to happen, then it would not happen, and that call wouldn't take place.
Yes, yeah, we asked the family if they would like that, and as Fred said, if they do, we get it organized and scheduled, and if they don't, then that's not a problem.
Any other questions? Is there a cost to families to have Tahara? That's a good question.
Cameron, you want to get that one?
Yeah, so there's a small donation that we collect. I believe it's $60, and then it's sent over to the Hever Kaddish. And you can, Sharon, make sure that I'm correct on that number. I believe it's $60.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. Yeah,
for the supplies and things like that.
that's correct.
And then in terms of costs, what are the average costs regarding each of the areas that we've described? Fred, do you want to take that one?
So I made the point, right? I said that dying is not inexpensive, and there's truth to that. So there are three three costs, two at the time of death and one later, right? So the two at the time of death, one is to the cemetery, the synagogue and the cemetery, and the other is to the funeral home. On the cemetery side, Neve Shalom members, our current cost is about $6,150, $6,150. And for non-members, we will bury Jewish non-members in our cemeteries. The cost is one side or the other of $14,000. So that's our cost. Then there is a second cost, a separate cost, as Cameron said earlier, with the funeral home. The third cost, which of course doesn't happen at the time of death, is the idea of a memorial stone, and that happens later, but it is another not insignificant cost in many cases. Cameron, you want to what costs are on your end? I know.
Yeah, as far as our costs, they vary. You know, it depends on what casket and so forth. But you know, pretty much for everything we take care of. You know, death certificates, the concrete outer burial container, all our services and everything. It's probably going to be in the range of $5,000 to $6,000. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, but that's kind of a average, I would say.
Yeah.
There's one thing that I omitted, which is actually important to talk about, and that's cremation. It's a touchy subject. We all know that. But my Hevra will do a Tahara for someone who is going to be cremated. Obviously, the Orthodox Hevra will not. So. There's another good question. Is a non-casket process allowed, and how does that process look? Yes, and Cameron can also attest to that. I've done, I think, only one green burial. It's a really beautiful process. I think it depends on the cemetery, right? Which if the green burial is allowed there or not. But we are absolutely open, at least on our end, to working with families if they have different ways that resting ideas for their loved one. I can also say we've done numerous taharas at home when people have had their loved one die at home and they want to have the tahara done at home, and then they would be taken. I mean, that they basically would spend as little time as possible in the funeral home. And we are known to get very creative in making that a very special ritual when it's done at a person's home. So.
We've done two non-casket burials that I can remember in recent years at our cemetery, at our Neve Shalom cemeteries. And while they're often described and the rationale for them are usually given as green burials, as more environmentally friendly burials, there are other rationales for non-casket. Any of you who have seen funerals in Israel, it is exceptionally rare that a casket is used at a funeral in Israel. So again, that predates the whole sensitivity to green and environmental issues. So there are longer term reasons and rationales, but we allow it at Neve Shalom. And as I said, I think I remember at least two that we've done in recent years.
Okay, there's a few more questions here on payment stuff, and Fred and Cameron about prepayments. I know at Neve Shalom we can certainly work with prepayments, and that would be through MARG most often. And Cameron, I'm assuming prepayments are certainly an option through Holman's.
Yes, we have somebody on staff, and you can make payments, and you can spread them out. You know, that's not my area of expertise, but yes, we do offer it. And it's her name is Zoe. She's on staff. She does a good job, and she can help answer those questions in better detail than I can. But yes, we do work with families, and payments are not a problem.
I would just add to that prepayment. Look, I talked earlier about pre-planning being important. Prepayment is also obviously really helpful to families. I will say to you, it is a really well-regulated system, prepayment, because one only has to look at the news. There have been really terrible stories about prepayments for funerals disappearing over the years. And so the states and the state have gotten into the regulatory business around prepayment of funerals. Our prepayments go into an endowment, which is part of a cemetery trust, and then taken out at the time of need for the operating expense that we would normally charge. So they're not commingled with operating funds. They're separated out, which again follows best practice in terms of care for your money. We steward people's money for sometimes, please God, long periods of time.
Thank you, Fred. And as a member of Neve Shalom, yes, the plot itself is part of the membership. But I think that's what you're asking about, Joan, and that's what's included. So as a member, part of your membership is the plot.
Yeah, I would be really honest about that, right? In some ways, it's a marketing interpretation, right? And why do I say that? When one looks at the synagogues in Portland, particularly Beth Israel and Neve Shalom, and we're very similar to each other in many ways, if one looks at our cost to die, right? The cemetery cost, that $61.50 I talked about, we're both right about the same amount of money. We describe the charges differently. Beth Israel says there's X amount for the plot, there's Y amount for the opening and closing, and there's Z amount for perpetual care, right? And what we say is your plot is free as a privilege of membership, and the $61.50 really is the operating cost of opening and closing and perpetual care. The numbers are the same in both places. We just describe them differently. So that might answer your question. But the perpetual care, which is about a third of that $61.50, that goes into the cemetery endowment. Why do we have a cemetery endowment? That wasn't asked, but I can answer it quickly, right? We have a cemetery endowment, which is a separately controlled amount of money and fund, separately supervised by a cemetery trust committee. And that exists because in the God forbid world that the synagogue would cease to exist, it exists so that the cemetery will be maintained beautifully in perpetuity, whether the synagogue functions or not, right? We've all seen cemeteries that are overgrown and in terrible condition that are old. That should never happen to either of the Neve Shalom cemeteries. So even if, God forbid, the synagogue stopped functioning, our cemeteries would be maintained forever.
Great. What if I have bought life insurance?
I can just say with us, if there's a life insurance policy, we can do what's called an assignment of interest, where we will collect our fees, and then whatever is left goes to the next of kin, or and we do that pretty often. We can help with that, and there's also sometimes families will just pay us our fee and then have that life insurance reimburse the family. So it can be done either way, at least on our end here at Holman.
Great. And Fred, what is the difference in cost if the green shroud burial is chosen?
Yeah, the answer is there is no cost. And the irony is, in some ways, it is actually more labor intensive on the cemetery side without a casket. Because again, part of the challenge in running a cemetery to keep it beautiful is to keep everything flat and even. And when there's no casket, the ground can sink. So it actually takes more sod, more soil, more care to maintain that plot than it does with a traditional casket and vault. So no, there's no cost savings, at least on the cemetery side, to a green burial.
Fantastic.
And on the funeral home side, it would, you wouldn't have to pay for a casket. You'd still have all of our professional services and all the things that the funeral home provides, but you wouldn't need to purchase the casket.
Fantastic. All really wonderful questions. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have one thing to say about the life insurance, we've had several people turn over life insurance policies or write us into their will or their insurance policy for burial fees and for headstone fees. So they tell me what they would like for a headstone and how to go about doing that. And and we take care of all of that in the same way that Holman's would.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Fred, do you see that next question there?
Yeah, my email notification just covered it. Yes, it's an interesting question, Joan. So within the $61.50 that we charge, $250 is allocated and placed in a sub account in our endowment for future property acquisition. So we've done a pretty good analysis, and we believe that in our cemeteries we have about 25 years worth of space for plots. And while for many people on this call that may sound like a lot, think about the congregations that bought these properties in 1869 and in 1890 respectively. They took care of us, and 25 years isn't very long, to be honest. Over the last 8 years, we've had 3 different opportunities to purchase additional land. And I will say that we've done a pretty good job of looking at it. It is much preferable to expand, to buy land adjacent to our existing cemeteries rather than to have a third location. And everybody can understand why a third location is that much more complicated in terms of equipment and space and schlepping back and forth and the like. It's much easier to have larger cemeteries too than to have a third cemetery. We've had a couple of opportunities to expand, and we didn't have the resources. We didn't have enough money to buy the houses or the space adjacent, which is why several years ago we created a land acquisition task force within our cemetery committee. They recommended that we add some money into the fee in order to plan for land acquisition. So we do have that going. We have about, not a lot, about $100,000, I think, in that fund right now. But we are aware of the need and the responsibility to expand our cemetery spaces over time.
Looks like Charlie was just asking, no casket, you would still have to purchase some kind of platform on which to lower the body. There is not a lot of difference between those and a plain pine box.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yes, someone just asked if it's being recorded. Yes, it is being recorded, and I will definitely get a link out to everyone.
As we understand, one of the items.
Hopefully Ricardo's home with you. Please God, thank you.
Hello.
Good.
Elaine and Arnold Cogan, we understood that part of the agenda today was what is called an ethical will. Are you planning to discuss that?
So that's actually that's going to be next week, Elaine. That's on the 17th. That's the second part of this program.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Great. Any other questions? Well, if not, please feel free to keep the question. Yes, go ahead. Hi, Jakob.
I sent something to Fred. Fred, read your chat.
Oh, you did? Oh, I'm sorry. The answer is ideally yes.
Fred, why don't you read the question?
Asked in any burial, but in a green burial, do we still place a concrete liner around the plot? And the answer is, generally speaking, yes. If the family requests not, we would have to talk about it. And again, I described earlier the idea of ground sinking. That is the purpose of liners. They help to keep the ground from sinking. So we do use liners. Thanks, Jakob. I'm sorry I wasn't reading carefully enough.
No problem. Okay. Well, this is Mara. Lori, any closing words? You're muted. There you go.
Next week, let us know other topics that we can address. We've done everything from Medicare to marijuana, so please let us know.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
And thank you for all of you who participated today. Cameron, Dale, Rabbi Posen, Lori, Sharon, Fred, Marg. This was really a team effort here, and really appreciate everyone being part of it. And if there are any other questions, I'm happy to stay on for a few minutes to answer any questions, but we appreciate all of you being here. And please God, we'll be able to be together soon in person. Oh.
Thank you, everybody.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Cameron.
Yeah, thank you all. Appreciate it.
Hey, Cameron, nice to see you. I'm sure we'll be talking.
Yeah.
Michelle?
Yes.
I'd be really interested, and I bet there'd be others too, in if a member or a rabbi, one of the rabbis offered a class on death and dying and the Jewish beliefs and traditions.
Absolutely.
So,
I will definitely bring that up.
Also, I still have to do a will, and I was wondering if there are recommendations from the synagogue, somebody trustworthy, that you could recommend. I mean, maybe not right this minute, but if you have people that could help me with a will.
I think we probably have some, I would imagine we have some recommendations we can give you. So why don't you send me an email, and I will, with that request in there, I'll see what I can do for you.
All right, thank you. This
You're
was
welcome.
wonderful. I learned
Good,
a lot.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Lynn. Good to see you.
Thanks.
Can I put something in the chat that you might
Sure.
be interested in?
Please.
I'm just gonna put it there. I'm not gonna, this is a class that is run by the Jewish Learning.
I'm on. No,
The what? I'm sorry?
I'm waiting to see what you put down. I'm
Yes,
not.
it's called Journey of the Soul, and I'm gonna put it to everyone. I'm copying a message from Rabbi Mati, and I'm just gonna put it in here. I took this class a few years ago, and it's fantastic and really is very enlightening, and it's not working. So I'm going to send you, well, I'm gonna try again. I don't know why it's not letting me copy. Hold on. Oh, there it is. Try that.
Oh.
No, is there a link in there, or did it not link?
No, it's Journey of the Soul, 6 Wednesdays, February 3rd. So it already started.
Yeah, but it's okay. You can join late. And this class repeats. Here's the direct link to more information. And if you just do that, you'll learn everything you need to know. There's a fantastic textbook that goes along with it. And it really takes a deep dive into understanding traditional Judaism's view on death and the soul and everything. It's really
Yeah, so we'll get a copy of this.
Well, Sharon, if you can send me that information, I'll.
Yeah, I'll send you the email. I don't know why it's not letting me do that. So.
And we'll definitely talk to our clergy and see if we can. I think, Lynn, I know that it's been a topic of conversation, and it's come up as a program idea quite often. So we will definitely bring it up again and see what we can do to make that happen.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Have
absolutely.
a good evening. Bye-bye.
You too. Thank you, Dale.
Michelle?
Yes.
I had to miss the last half hour. Is it,
It's recorded, and I'll send out a link either today or tomorrow for sure.
Okay, thanks, Michelle.
Of course. My pleasure.
And thank you to all the other speakers, because that was wonderful.
Good. Excellent. All right. I think we're good. Yep. All the Michelle Kaplans are leaving.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sharon.
Welcome. See ya. Bye.
Bye.